Welcome again, everyone, to Track Talk. Today's episode is Track Talk with Rick Marotta. We're going to talk about Steely Dan's epic tune, Peg, a song all of us drummers have pulled our hair out over a million times trying to play this song the correct way. And guess what? I promise you, you never have. If you see Rick play it, you'll realize you're not playing it right. So, anyway, I'm excited to have my dear friend, the legendary Rick Marotta, here with me. And so please welcome the one and only legendary and very funny man, Rick Marotta. Unless I've lost him. And there he is.
I fell asleep in the waiting room. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Rick.
Now, let me just ask you something.
Yes.
We're on a limited time here, you told me, and I'm in the waiting room, and I literally passed out. I just want to know what you were talking about, and I really hope it wasn't Steve Gadd and Asia while I was in the waiting room, because
No, it was.
that would be upsetting.
I was talking about all the other records you've played on and how incredible they are. And there was never one mention. Who? Steve who? Never one mention of him.
Yeah, talking about my career wouldn't take that long.
Well, Rick,
Um,
before we, well, I know you want to jump in. You're a busy man, but I want to just tell you something I have to apologize to you for. And I hope you forgive me. And it doesn't affect our friendship. When I told you about this great idea that I had about a month ago, when I called you excited about this new podcast idea, and I
my idea.
told your idea, and I told you the name of it was Trash Talk. And the idea is that you could come on and you could trash talk all these drummers.
Rip all these other drummers, right?
Yeah.
There's only
Well,
one. There's only one I want to rip,
okay. I wasn't honest with you, and I
and he
kind of
knows who he is.
I know he knows. I misled you. The name of the show is Track Talk, actually. So we're
Well,
actually
I'm
not going to.
honored. I'm very honored to be the first guest on Track Talk. Since you told me I wasn't going to do it, but you said I was going to be the pilot episode, and I really was honored by that, being the
Yep.
first guy on that.
And yep, I couldn't think of a
Anyway,
better
when people
guy.
don't want to hear us banter, they want to hear somebody wants to hear something interesting. So, what do you want to talk about?
All right, we're going to talk about Peg. We're going to talk about Peg, and thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah, and thanks
I, I
everybody for watching.
I would like to say that I saw Steve's. That was really a good. It was really great. You know, listened to him talk. I'm about to hear with him talking about himself and stuff. But uh, it was really interesting, and I learned some stuff listening to that about his attitude, and stuff in the studio. It was informative and really good to hear. And I love the way you took the song apart. This is going to be a little different because I'm the opposite of a drum soloist. I don't even solos are not anything that I've ever aspired to or try. You know, I was never good at drum solos.
Yeah, yep.
And there are guys that are so good at it out there that why bother?
But you don't need to be, Rick. You know, you're not hired to play
Well,
drum
we're here to
solos.
talk
Yeah.
about Peg, which I mean, there aren't a lot of pop songs that have drum solos on it that have been as success as acclaimed as Asia. But we're here to talk about Peg off the Asia album, and I'm happy to talk about it because people ask me about it all the time, and I don't really have any of the answers. So I'm just going to use this format with you to explain to people. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't know about that. And
So when you ask me,
the,
I'm not going to know.
to
Yes.
quote you, I don't know about that. Okay. Well,
Uh,
first of all, I think there's some great context and some great background that we can share that people probably that follow your career already know this about you, but you, unlike Steve, who, and this will be the last time we talk about Steve,
oh,
um, you had worked with Steely Dan before you recorded Peg, before the Asia album. You'd
Mm,
worked with them on the Royal Scam album.
hmm.
And so, and that was, and we just discovered, "Don't Take Me Alive," of course, was the song that I always knew. Um, and you're credited.
I'm not sure about anything else on that album.
Okay, all right. And lesson learned on my part, Rick. I saw on Wikipedia that Asia was recorded at Village Recorders, and it was recorded at the producer's workshop, and some other stuff was done at
Oh,
Village. So yeah,
why do we care about Steve?
no, I'm talking about the Asia album. It's listed on the on Wiki as being in a few
We did
different
not
places.
record Peg at Village
It's Village.
or producers. We didn't do that.
You did it in New York.
Uh, we did in New York. Yeah.
You did. Okay, good. I was getting to that. But my point is, you had worked with Donald and Walter before this
Mhm.
record, and you had recorded. So Peg had been recorded. Part of the Asia album was recorded at A&R in New York, and that's where you did
Mm.
Peg. Okay, great.
A&R 52nd, A&R
Yep.
7th Avenue,
Yep. Okay. And is that
52nd
where you
Center.
had recorded "Don't Take Me Alive"? Same studio, just out of.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where they worked in New York.
We did.
It's
I don't know how many songs we did the night we did "Don't Take Me Alive," but I remember "Don't Take Me Alive." I think that was the first song I ever did with them.
yeah. It's a
Anyway,
great
what do you
song.
want to talk about?
Okay.
Let's
All right.
jump into Peg.
Yeah. Well, that's great. That clarifies a lot of things because I think for me and I'm willing to bet a lot of people watching think of that as being like an LA studio. It's kind of got like an LA vibe to it. You know what I mean? It's kind of been put in the yacht rock genre, in the
Mm.
years. And it's easy for you to kind of think it's part of that, that LA, like what Andy Newmark referred to as that, LA drumming kind of thing. Um, but it's got your Rick Marotta mojo, which is that New York thing. Um, I was curious to know how far, if you know, how far into the making of that record did you record Peg? And I'm going to guess it was probably early into it if you did it in New York. I think in the spring of '77.
I would
Or do you know the year that you did it?
I would think it was early
Yeah,
in the making of the record,
yeah.
but I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah,
Um, with Donald and Walter, you didn't really know. It was just that they would pop up. We'd work on a record for a few days or a week. Um, then they'd go somewhere else and work on it. And I don't remember what part of the where we were in the making of, but it was there was a lot of time I spent with them on and off, so I knew uh, I had I had a relationship with them. It wasn't like it wasn't like just walking in and looking at a chart. It was you were there and you knew you had some leeway.
yeah. And you had that. Was that because you had already recorded with them, or because they just knew you anyway? But it was you.
I think everybody did. I don't think that they were. It's an interesting thing with them in general. Everyone had a different experience with them, but as you can see in the making of Asia documentary that they did, um, you can see that just in their description of the making of Peck. By the way, I'm sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I sound a little stuffed. Um, in the making of Asia, you see them. It was terrible, I thought, but they were raising the different guitar players
Yeah, yeah,
solos in Peg before they got to Jay Graydon's solo, and um, interestingly, that would not be uncommon for them in that you came in and you had something to say. They said, "Let's hear it."
hmm
That was basically what they were about. Let's hear it. You got something? Here's the song. What do you want to contribute to it? And if they had a chart might look like this. It might look like just chords.
hmm
A lot of times there'd be hits. You'd see hits on the chart, like those little breakdowns. Either they were written in there or we wrote them in. But they were very proud. They probably wrote them. They probably had those there, and we just played them or wrote them in. But uh, yeah, they gave you. It wasn't, listen to what Steve played on it. Listen to Asia.
Yeah,
Who's going
yeah,
to let you do that?
right, right. Yeah, so that's really interesting to know that too, Rick. In that in terms of the chart or whatever sort of makeshift chart they gave you, did you have any sort of scratch demo to listen to get an idea of any kind of
I
feel, or did they
don't
leave the feel
think.
to you?
No, I don't think so. I never remember having heard anything. It wasn't really in their. I don't think it was really in their DNA to do that. I think that it was you bring there. It was what you bring to the table. That's what you do. That do what you do
Yeah,
and make it sound like us.
right.
So I don't think, like if I played it, as I told you before, the funny story, when I arrived in LA at the airport, I ran into Jim Keltner, and Keltner came up to me and said that should have been me on Peg, because he had cut it. And I said, but it's not. It's me. I
I
felt
told you that still keeps him up at night.
I know.
I talked to him a
It,
couple of months ago about it.
I felt his pain. I felt his pain many times. So he's not alone. He's not alone in that horror.
But when
But
seriously, go ahead. Sorry, Rick. Go ahead.
I know you want to keep this brief. So what do you want? What do you want me to? I don't
Well,
remember. I can
we're
remember a lot about the session.
we're done. We're done. It's a wrap.
Oh,
No,
that's it.
I gotta tell you, Jim, and you should know this, that Jim, whenever he talks about that song, he is nothing but just complimentary. Just he's and always praises the job you did on the groove and the job that you did on that song. Needless to
Well,
say.
that's
Um,
nice of him.
well, I'm going to jump ahead to a question that I had about Jim and about Bernard, because Bernard also did a version of it, I believe, right?
No, I know he did a live version of it with them he's playing it in when they put the band together with Paul Griffin and those guys.
Yes. Yep.
And they were doing making of. I don't know exactly, but that was in New York. I was in Los Angeles when they did my interview for that.
Yeah.
So they wanted me to play it. But when they did the version of them playing it live, I think that was Bernard played it. He played it really well.
Yeah, he did. I just, what, I thought that I'd heard
Bernard
that.
plays anything really well.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely. Absolutely. And I thought both Jim and Bernard had taken a pass at, maybe it was just Jim had done it, just Keltner. But I think you've answered my question in that I'm thinking timeline wise that you recorded it in the springtime of, say, 77. Jim maybe did it later, but in the end, it was your version that they kept. I mean, you were done with it, and then that was the last you heard about it, basically, right? You
You
cut the
mean
track.
you're telling me that you think that when I did it, they thought they were going to get a better groove track? Then I find that hard to believe.
Well, maybe
I mean,
they.
maybe, but
Well, they say that the record, the album, was cut between 76 and 77. So with that in mind, they may have had Jim do it in 76, and then you in the spring of 77. I'm just curious how that all worked in terms of the timing. I only found out just now that you did it in New York. I thought maybe you had gone out to LA to do it, and they had those
no,
sessions kind of consecutive. So okay,
no.
well, this is
I
great.
was Lee. I know. I remember. We were in New York. I remember that night, and we did it. We finished it at night too. It was really late,
Yeah.
and I remember we did it in New York. And I remember it distinctly because I was leaving for Los Angeles about 4 days, 3 or 4 days after that.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah,
Okay.
so I remember that.
And the drums were in the studio. Did A&R had a house kit in those days?
So
Probably.
now we can get to the track. A&R had a house kit that we all pretty much used, and it was trash.
Yeah.
But sometimes when I would go, like for example, I'll give you an interesting thing about Peg. There's only one fill on it that I play twice, and it's all on the snare drum.
Yeah.
And I had gotten this snare drum at that time was a wooden snare drum. I carried when you walked into A&R 52nd, so on 7th Avenue, you brought your trap kit, cymbals, and sticks.
Yep.
And in my trap kit, I had some little hardware, maybe a hi-hat stand and hi-hats. I had hi-hats and all that kind of stuff.
Pedal maybe too?
And a pedal, absolutely, yeah. You brought your pedal, and it was a fiber trap case. I'd throw it in a cab and go to every session. It was a pain in the ass. And then, so I remember that I brought this snare drum with me. And it was one that I had gotten from Frank Ippolito at the Pro Drum Shop. And it was Frank told me it was, he was friends with Buddy Rich. And he told me it was Buddy's snare drum. And it was that gray pearl or whatever. And it had those, the throws on the Slingerland throws on it. Mm-hmm. And I pulled the throws off of that. And that was when I used to work on drums a lot. And I pulled the throws off and I put Ludwig throws on and changed the snares. And I put a Canasonic head on the top. The thing was so odd and it sounded great. And I brought that to a lot of sessions I did. Brought that for Steely Dan, because I said, when in LA, if Keltner showed up or Jim Gordon or Jeff, there would be a case in LA at that time. Excuse me, just snare drum. Mm-hmm. There'd be 20 snare drums, easily 20 in the case. I've seen the case to open them up, stacks of snare drums. I went with one snare drum, and Ralph McDonald would walk in with all of his percussion gear over his shoulder, and the congas were there, and he'd have his percussion gear over his shoulder. I came to LA, literally truckloads would come. Percussion, we're doing a session, the percussion guys show up, and a truck with just their gear is there. And I went, Ralph McDonald carries the shit on his shoulder. So anyway. I had this this Canasonic snare, this Canasonic head on that snare drum, and I liked it's kind of a tight sound.
It was a Slingerland snare, Rick, too, just to clarify, wood Slingerland.
Yeah, I think it was Slingerland wooden snare, and I went, this is. I started hitting the snare drum, and I remember Walter was walking behind me, pacing, and he's looking at the snare drum. I could see what's going. What's going on. Not them anywhere. I've been with people that look at my cymbal and they freak out. So I we're playing, and the snare sounded so good to me. And Walter said, "I don't know about that snare drum." Oh. And then, you got Elliot Shiner. Elliot Shiner is like, it's great. It sounds great. And Roger Nichols is like, who cares what the snare drum sounds like? So, but that's what it started out as. And I thought, I like the sound of the snare so much. The toms, everybody would tune and retune those toms. Those toms, those heads never got changed. And they were just disgusting. And I wouldn't hit them that day. I just said, you know what? No fills. Tom, I went boom, boom, boom. They sound terrible. Pat, 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 boom, bat, pat. So that's how that whole thing came. I just didn't want to hit the tom-toms.
Wow.
And there was really no reason to hit them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you listen to it now, and speaking of that, let's play a little bit of it, if you don't mind.
Picture, 'cause your name in lights above it. This is your big debut. looks good on you. And when you smile for the camera, I know I love you better. Hey, it will come back to you. Hey, it will come back to you. Then the shadow falls. You see it all repeat. It's your favorite foreign movie. It will come back to you. Hey, it will come back to you. Then the shadow falls. You see it all repeat. It's your favorite foreign movie. It will come back to you. Hey, it will come back to you. Then the shadow falls. You see it all repeat. It's your favorite foreign movie. It will come back to you. Hey, it will come back to you. Then the shadow falls. You see it all repeat. It's your favorite foreign movie.
Man. So Rick, I've never
I
had,
didn't know you were going to play the whole song. It's time to go, isn't it? The thing is over.
well, I was going to stop in the middle, but I thought I'm sure everybody's been waiting for it. I know I have been. Play it all the way through. And we're going to go back to it, but I've never asked you this. I don't think, at least I don't remember. Did you play to a click track on that song? Do you remember?
I would think, yeah.
Okay.
I would think yes.
Thank God.
Where they used the Uri click back then, but my thing with the click track was I felt very comfortable with clicks. My trick with the click track is if I can hear it, I'm not playing with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I played click, if I heard it, stop the take.
It comes up at 117 beats per minute, and it's just dead on. I mean, I this morning I was just clocking it, and right up through, I stopped, when it got into the vamp sort of at the end, but it's just, especially
Yeah, I'm sure it was a click. I mean, it was Elliot Shiner, and we were A&R. I'm sure they threw a click up. I mean, I wouldn't. I don't remember, but I never questioned it. It was always there were clicks everywhere back then.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, it's such an amazing track. A couple of things too. I want to point out that I've observed over the years, and I don't know if I'm guessing it was maybe just more what you were feeling at the time, but throughout the song, you play the hi-hat on the verse, and what was sort of a kind of a standard way for people to make records was you'd play the verse and the hi-hat, chorus on the ride cymbal. Probably made a lot of records that way, right? That song, you play the hi-hat all the way through until the last minute, and I think it's the repeated chorus as you get into the outro that you switch to the ride cymbal. Now, was that a conscious thing, or did you just?
Yeah.
What was the reason for that? What were you thinking at that point?
Well, here's the interesting thing about that track. I mean, we're sort of going over. I've talked about it so much, but I never really analyzed it. Here's the deal with that track. So, as I said in the original Making of Asia DVD, my hi-hats and cymbals I love my setup, right? So I had to have my cymbals and hi-hats. And I had been working, a lot of guys are working on playing things really fast. And I worked a lot on the sound of my drums because I was very frustrated in New York at what drums sounded like on records. And it drove me crazy. I was having a conversation with David Spinoza the other day, and we were talking about it, and he goes, remember when we used to play at this one studio? And he said, Rick, I remember you used to get hives because when we hear the playback, they had one speaker and you would go crazy. And so I worked more on sound. So anyhow, I remember I was working when I was doing some sessions, especially this one, we cut this one track, didn't make the James Taylor album, but it was called, it was an old Bobby Blue Bland song called You're the One. And at the end, the hi-hats for, the cymbal swells at the ends of a song,
Yeah.
I only did them on the hi-hats. And I would practice doing things like that, where I could just hear my left foot would just open and close just the tiniest little bit. Every nut and lug and everything on the hi-hat had to be exactly right to do it.
Mhm.
And I was lucky. I would always work on that stuff. That's what I would work on more. Like, is this hi-hat sounding right and all that kind of stuff? And so when we were doing the track, if we want to talk about the track and people ask me these questions, I'm going to tell you I'm going to answer the questions that people ask me. And if you have anything more you want to ask me about it, go ahead. But I remember on that track, a lot of times it's like they say studio musician this, studio musician that. Chuck Rainey and I had been on the road together for over 2 years with Roberta Flack.
Right.
We were in recording studios together at least a couple of times a week for years. We were on the road for over 2 years, 2.5 years with Roberta Flack. And we played, Chuck and I had a shorthand. We really could play well together.
Yeah.
So you call Chuck Rainey to show up, who I wish people knew more about, and you call Rick Marotta to show up. It's like calling the guys in the band.
Mm-hmm.
So Don Grolnick was on session. He's a guy I've played with forever, since I started playing in New York. Don Grolnick was the keyboard player I played with all the time. We were on the road together. We did sessions together. We worked on everything together. So you're really like this, right?
Yeah.
And on when we did that, I remember Donald, the consummate musician that he is, would sit down and he would play it and sing it. Don't. So he's playing that dotted figure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And right away, I know as soon as we counted it off, I know Chuck and I are going to go like this.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen.
Yep.
And so, if I remember correctly, this was one of those things that was not really very cerebral. I listened mostly to Chuck and a lot to Donald playing or Grolnick playing that figure, or if Paul Griffin was there. I can't remember everybody who was in the room at the time. But I know Grolnick was there. I know Chuck was there. I was there. Donald was there. Walter was there.
And so you cut the tune as a complete rhythm section with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Great. Yep.
And it was on fire. So here's the thing. So we start playing it, and one of the things that I had learned playing so much with Chuck is Chuck can play busy. Chuck's a slapper and a popper and all that kind of stuff. He invented that kind of playing. If you really want to know Chuck Rainey's playing, you go listen to Sanford and Son. That's him on that Quincy Jones thing playing, That's Chuck playing that insanely great bass part, which totally makes that soundtrack.
Yeah.
I mean, that theme song.
Quincy Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, Quincy. Yeah. So the thing I learned playing with Chuck live is we could. I used to call it whisper jet because you're with Roberta, and it's on stage. It was Eric Gale, Cornell Dupree. It was Stuff. It was the original Stuff band. It was Cornell Dupree, Eric Gale, me, Richard T, Chuck Rainey, and it wasn't bashing. I could play the rock and roll stuff I was playing, but it wasn't that. It was, you could. I called it. I said it was like we take off. And back then they used to have this term for when they were flying. Somebody was screaming, "We're going to go in a whisper jet." That's what it was like. It was like we just took off. So I knew a lot of times playing with Chuck, when Chuck gets a little bit, starts doing his motion, I just would sit into it. Okay. I would just sort of, okay, here's where we are. His time was ridiculous. He had great time. The click, you never had to fight with Chuck. And I would just slide into where he's playing and not play every note that he's playing. So I would pick a note, like a bolt, that's I could just play that with whatever he's playing, and it's going to feel like I'm playing everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back at that time, we talked about. When I first started playing, people would say to me, there was this other drummer, very, very beginning of my playing in New York. There was this drummer who so good. Jerry played with him in Orleans. His name was Wells Kelly.
Oh,
And
sure.
Wells and I were very, we're at the same time, we're getting a lot of work. And then Wells went with Orleans and I was with Brethren. But first he was with Harvey Brooks's band. And I remember them talking and saying, you two guys are the New York guys, right? But you play so differently. And the difference was Wells, they were explaining to me, Wells plays up here on top of the drums. You play down here underneath the drums.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really, really good at visual descriptions and stuff. When people say to me, when they want me to play a certain way, if they would say to me, I like that funky knuckle bottom kind of, I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand when they do that, talking colors, whatever it is, it's weird, but I relate to those abstracts. So I understood what they were saying. On Peg, I thought to myself, I must have been working on this thing, and I must have been working on it with Chuck, where when we were playing, instead of playing straight eights on hi-hat, I would play, I kind of changed the figure up. Back then there was a lot of disco music, so people are playing this kind of thing was going on all the time.
Yeah.
Every session was so I would start to fool around with that because it was driving me crazy. And one of the things was playing that kind of a hi-hat pattern, but just fiddling with my foot. And so when we got to the chorus, instead of going over to the ride cymbal, when we must have run it once or twice, I felt like this little thing going on. And I kind of remember looking over at Chuck and Chuck looking at me. He won't remember this, but we're like, oh yeah, this is feeling really good. And when we went to the chorus, we just added each of us, he started thumping, cranking, and I would just added a couple of notes, but I changed the way I was moving my left foot on the hi-hat. A lot of that was, by the way, influenced by Andy Newmark rubbing it in about his studying with Alan Dawson at Berkeley, and he kept talking about independence. So rather than work on a bunch of chops back then, I would work on independence to try to get these things going on at different times. So, doing not that my independence is that great.
Yeah.
No, doing that is not easy for me to do, but doing this is easier for me. So I got both feet going at the same time.
Yeah.
And I had these little parts going, but I kept everything over here on the right side. So when we did the verse was here, and the chorus, cymbals are going like this, because my foot's going like this.
Yeah.
Not much. I mean, not even so little that it's just the difference between the crisp closed hi-hat and that little slush sound of a hi-hat. And in between, there are these other little, the things used to change, these little tiny little sounds. I know it sounds crazy and wacky, but I really felt like that was what inspired me on that groove, play that groove. I was thinking up here. I wasn't thinking a whole lot of down here. I was thinking, okay, my feet are going to naturally do something when Chuck plays, because we do this dance together. I know that when we went to the chorus, I added 1 or 2 bass drum hits. That was it. In the circle of, in the 2 or 4 bar pattern, in those 2 bars, I would add 2 notes. Or one note every 2 bar, or every 2 bars, or 2 notes every 2 bars, something. I think it was like 1 note every 2 bars or something like that, just in a certain spot, just maybe a little upbeat, or an 8th note following a downbeat, something like that, which would just flip it around a little bit.
Yeah. And Rick, I'm going to see if I can find that spot. Well, I know I can find it. It just might take a second. the first chorus.
This is your big debut. It's like a dream come true. Camera, I know they're gonna love it. Peg, I like your
They go to the
picture.
next verse here. Okay.
All looks good on you. For the camera, I know I love you better. Peg, it will come back to you. Peg, it will come back to you. Then the shutter falls. You see it all revealed. It's your favorite foreign movie.
Yeah. So
It's so friggin' good. It's
so, but I mean, this is just. I'm trying to service the explanation of. It's a little bit self-serving, but I'm just trying to service the explanation of what it is that I was thinking and playing at the time. Only because so many people, and I'm so humbled by it, have asked me about it. Because I don't take myself as seriously as some other people we know do. I don't want to mention his name, but but I do remember when we did it. That was a really strange night during and after personal side of things, and Grolnick and I hung out almost pretty much all night that night. And Don, I remember, was talking about how when we left, how I'm pretty sure I remember Don talking about how good it felt. And Chuck and I were like, and I do remember Chuck and I going, "What are we gonna do? I can't do it any different than that." And there was no dilly-dallying around. There were no questions. But the thing is, I kind of remember, Donald and Walter would be like, if for them, it was interesting. Steve, it was so great with talking about Asia, and Steve was talking about in general his wanting to make someone happy in the room, and
that's the
and
difference
sometimes-
between you and him. That's
Oh yeah, no, I don't want to sound like that. I look. There are times when you're trying too hard to make people happy, and it really blows up in your face. But I have to say, when you're working with Steely Dan, it's pretty funny. They were never there. Like if Donald would go, if Donald said, "Yeah, that was pretty good," it was like, "Oh my God,
yeah.
this guy loved it," and Walter too. Yeah, that was really good. But I miss them, and I miss playing with them. As rough as it was, and as much as I wanted to quit, those were guys that really made me learn how to appreciate songs. And when they talk about yacht rock, I get it, but I don't get it, because if you listen to their lyrics, this is just a departure from Peg for a second. If you listen to their lyrics are crazy deep. I mean, like crazy deep. Don't Take Me Alive was the first song I ever did with them. And I always talk about it because I didn't even want to do the session because I don't know we were so busy and I'm so lazy. And those are the first words I heard out of Donald's mouth. And it was musical life changing for me. I remember thinking, this is unbelievable songwriting. And all of those songs on Royal Scam are what? Come on, man.
Yeah, it's a great record. Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I had an old girlfriend who when we met, she had a cat. The cat was named Deacon. Oh. So she wasn't a musical person, she liked music and stuff. Deacon. She goes, "Yeah, I named him after Deacon Blues. You know that band, Steely Dan?" Oh God. Yeah, isn't that who Steve Gadd plays with?
At least you didn't name the cat Asia, you know?
A lot of people have.
All right, Rick, couple of more questions and I'm going to let you off the hook here. But then we're going to we're going to give all our folks watching and all your fans a little special treat at the end of this show. Don't worry, you don't have to play a drum solo. So we talked about Chuck, and you answered a question which I was going to ask, and you've told me many times about your history and your long relationship and friendship with Chuck, so that made perfect sense. And just in how you guys just agreed instantly on where the beat would be and how the groove would go. I mean, you've covered that beautifully, and I thank you for that. That's because that's the magic, obviously, of that song.
But a lot of that is Chuck. I mean, you listen to he's playing drums on the bass, and also I have to say this about Chuck Rainey. My relationship with Chuck was, at that time, we were so close. He made me feel more confident about what I was going. If I was going to try something, he'd make me feel really confident. And if I blew up and it really stunk, he would be the first one to say, "Man, what are you playing?" You know, he would have said, "What? Don't do that. That sucks." But
yeah,
you know, that's all part of the thing that goes on in the room. I mean, it's hard for me to explain, but there's the way we made records back then. A lot of times, everybody in the room together, if you can get everybody in tune and everybody focused on the song at the same time, that's the hard part about doing it. But when everybody plays the stuff together, it's magic.
Yeah,
you all contribute to each other.
yeah. And speaking of great bass players, I just want to make a quick mention and shout out to our friend Stanley Sheldon, who is watching live right now. And
My
yeah,
bandmate.
your bandmate from I was gonna say brethren, but from
Ronan.
Ronan. Ronan.
But
And
Stanley and I met when we did Frampton Comes Alive tour. Stanley was the original bass player, and I took John Siomis's place for a little while.
yeah, yep. And Stanley commented, you guys played with Warren Zevon, and he said,
Yeah.
remember being in the car with Rick and hearing a track you guys cut together. Everyone wanted to learn and play that groove. Rick was like, yeah, sounds pretty good. So Stanley, hello. Good to see you out there, buddy. Yeah. And Tom Major, by the way, is watching. Presumably
I love Tommy Major. What a great drummer.
Great drummer. A friend out in Martha's Vineyard there, Tommy Major from N Train. So I might have already asked you this. I think we might have talked about this. The process, the way you went about tracking this song, was it kind of a similar process to when you recorded "Don't Take Me Alive"? I mean, was it kind of the same? Did Gary Katz as producer have a lot of direction for you, or did he kind of leave it to you? And
No, Gary
Donald and
was
Walter?
great. Gary was great at going good, no good,
Yeah,
good, no good. You know, he was good at being just like a cheerleader. He was there. He and very respectful. It wasn't like ripping guys apart. It was these guys. You're with the best. It's that interesting thing about doing Steely Dan stuff. You're with the best of the best in every way. You're with Donald and Walter, and you're with the best guys on their instruments in the room at one time. There's not a weak link.
yeah,
The weakest link I would always feel would be me.
Wow.
So yeah, we cut those as a band. As a band would cut it together.
Yeah. Any idea how many takes you
No.
guys did? Was it a
No.
lot?
I would bet. Here's my guess. I don't know. I could be completely wrong about this. I know that we went really late that night.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm pretty sure we probably cut other things. I would think that we didn't do a lot of takes, but we probably, they were never in a rush either. It wasn't like, I can remember a lot of times. I remember lunches and dinners that we had, when we were just sitting around eating in the studio. But I don't think we did, for some reason, I don't think we did a lot of takes. I think that's one of those songs where the more takes you do, the less of that spontaneity and that there's a little bit of magic that happens that goes away.
Yeah.
I always had that problem. My magical powers go bang.
We'll talk about that on a future Track Talk when we talk about Jackson Browne's Boulevard, which we won't give away now. We'll save that for another episode, which is a great story unto itself. Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying on that, Rick, and I would think that was the case, that it wasn't a lot of takes, but I just wondered, and if you had to guess, based on what you've told me as far as...
I think that Keltner probably did more takes than I did because he wasn't getting it.
I'm going to send him the link.
I love him,
on
so he
YouTube.
knows how much I love him.
I know. And by the way, speaking of amazing drummers, Peter Erskine is watching, and he says, Rick is my hero.
Oh, now let me tell you something.
Peter Erskine.
First time I heard Steely Dan, I went to the Greek Theater because Donald and Walter called me. They said, hey, we're playing. I was on the road with somebody, right? And I'm in town. They called me. They said, hey, you want to come? We're going to do the show. Yeah, sure. I want to come and watch somebody else play with Steely Dan. No, I don't want to. But I went, and Peter was playing drums with them.
I saw that tour, 93, 30 years ago.
Oh, man, did he play. And when he got to Peg, I thought, you know what? Sure, he can play Ricky Don't Lose That Number, but wait till he gets to Peg. Tore it up. And I told him, and he told me, he's such a sweet, brilliant, really, really great musician. He said that he worked really hard on that song.
He told me the same thing at the time. He said, well, I remember him saying, that's a really tricky little groove there to play it the right way. And I remember thinking, holy shit, he's found that mojo, to play it with the authenticity.
And you know what's interesting is different guys I've seen play the groove. Like I also saw Keith Carlock, and he killed it. Yeah. And I just thought, these great guys these amazing musicians are playing a part that I played. I'm so honored and flattered by it. I don't even know what to say. It makes me laugh because I think it's so funny that these guys are learning a part that I came up with. Big deal.
It's pretty great. The last thing I was going to ask you, and then we'll put a pin in Peg. I just came up with that.
What a genius!
When you guys finished, or when you at least were thought you were done for the night, you and Chuck and Don and everybody, did you feel like you'd recorded something really special? Did you feel like this was really something pretty special here? I mean, did you have any kind of vibe about that, or?
I can't remember that part. I remember thinking this felt really good. For me, it was about what does it feel like? It's like I know I left there conflicted because I had personal stuff going on, but when I left there, I remember feeling like that felt really good. That was really good. Now, You never know with Steely Dan. You never know what's going to be great, or I don't know. Everything is great. You just never know what's going to be a hit. The fact that Peg was kind of a commercial hit for them was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's funny for me when I was in Miami, I was walking around. When I go to a grocery store, if I'm walking around a grocery store and there's music playing, somehow when Peg comes on in a grocery store, the two just I go, this is so great. I'm walking down like the bread aisle at a grocery store, and on comes Peg. It just doesn't. It's just a weird. Should or shouldn't it be here?
All right. Well, this reminds me. We have to tell a story. We have to tell a story. I'm going to let you tell it. But I also want to just ask you. I started to ask this before, I think. Do you have any sense, Rick? You've talked about it, and all the other guys that have played on the record, Asia, have talked about bringing a different kind of.
Oh, I have to say, we have to do a shout out to Drum Paradise and Harry McCarthy.
Yes, of course, of course. Hopefully,
My old
Harry's
drum
watched.
tech.
Yeah, he may have. Well, it was in New York, so he probably didn't, but he was your neighbor at that time. But when do you have any sense for when they recorded it in L.A. with Jim? Were any of the guys, was Chuck Rainey also in the band, or
No,
was it a
I have
completely
no.
different band?
I never knew they cut it with Jim until Jim stopped me. The song had already been out, and Jim stopped me in the airport to tell me to play. His poor wife, I just never will forget it. He's picking up drums, I'm picking up my stuff. We're both landing from someplace. And I'm coming in from New York. And Cynthia, his wife, is out in the car, in the van, got the van door open to put his stuff in. She's looking at us having this animated conversation. And I didn't know Cynthia back then. And I thought, and you know, Jim Keltner is who we're talking about, is the most gentle, sweet, loving, sweet guy, and an absolute brilliant drummer. I mean, I was very, very, very influenced by him when I came up playing.
Absolutely. Well, if we have time, let's if I think
we
one of
don't
the
have
funniest,
time. We've gone 30 minutes over our allotted
we have.
time.
All right.
People hate us now.
One of
It's not my fault, folks. I can get right to I can cut to the chase, get in and get out.
Oh, no, you can't. No, you can't. We knew this was going to go long.
I didn't start this whole thing talking about Asia.
All right. So you have to tell the story about playing golf on Martha's Vineyard. President Obama, who also is a member of your club on the vineyard.
God. I don't want to tell that story.
A condensed version. It's a great story. It's a great story. You have to.
Oh God! Oh,
I could tell it, but I won't do it. I'll miss important pieces.
My assistant and her husband have two children who I love as much as if they were my own grandchildren or kids. And Milo, her son, I took him to the golf course on Martha's Vineyard, the Vineyard Golf Club. And it happened to be, I took him with me he's 8. He was 7 at the time. And I took him so that we're going to play a little, we're going to go to the range and we're going to practice a little bit. I'm trying to teach him to play a little bit of golf. And Milo and I went. And as we pull in, I notice the driving range at this exclusive club on Martha's Vineyard is packed. And I go, oh, it's President Obama's birthday today. Oh, this is last year. It's President Obama the year before. It's President Obama's birthday today. Milo, I'm really sorry, we might not be able to hit balls. It's very crowded. Okay. So I said, we'll just go down. And I saw Jason Benko, the guy who runs the place. And he said, oh, no, they're going to go out in a minute. There's a bunch of guys. It's his birthday. He's got a bunch of tee times, but it'll be fine. Just go up, hit balls. I said, okay, Milo, we're going to go up. And as we're walking up, we're walking up to hit balls. I said, if you see President Obama, you go and you say, happy birthday, Mr. President. And Milo's aware because we see Obama there a lot. Milo's aware of who he is, and it's his birthday. So as we're walking up, it just so happens, as we're walking up, President Obama and his guys start to dissipate, and he's walking to a cart that's about 30 or 40 feet from us. So I walk away from Milo and I said, there's the president. Don't forget what you're going to say. And I walk away. I don't want to be, I'm having such a great time watching him. And he walks over and he looks over at Obama and he goes, happy birthday, Mr. President. And Barack Obama, nice man as he is on the golf course, turns to Milo, and he says, "Young man, thank you very much, young man. Are you going to play golf today? Yeah. Are you? You know, they have this little conversation, and I'm not in it. I'm way off to the side, but I've got this big smile on my face, and he's talking, you know, well, I hope you have a good, keep it up, and you know, he's being President Obama, and Milo goes, okay, thank you, happy birthday, thank you very much, young man." And as he gets in his car to drive away, he looks over at me, Obama does, and he goes, "By the way, I really like Steely Dan." And he's driving off. And I go, so my reaction, being the professional celebrity that I am, I go, wow. I didn't even know what to say.
I wouldn't either. Yeah. Hey, I love your podcast.
I really like you playing on Steely Dan.
Oh, I love
So
it.
the guys came up to me at the club. They said, "Did we hear?" Yeah, I said, "Yeah, that was so weird." They go, "He knows everything that's going on with everybody at this club."
Yeah. Yep. That's hilarious. Well, Rick, thank you so much for doing this. I'm not going to
It's
let
my
you leave.
pleasure. I hope that whoever was listening to this, under all, you know, you and I, when we talk, we're such close friends. We go on and on and on and on, and we could go, you know, start bantering and doing that stuff. But I hope that something I said touched, because a lot of people really care about this groove on Peg, and I respect it, and I don't want to marginalize how appreciative I am of the people that appreciate that. So I want people to know, as simple as it is, you and I both know, the other guy that came up to me in the golf course said, "Hey, you play with Steely Dan, right, on those records?" Yeah, I play on some of those records. Yeah. Somebody said you played on Peg. Yeah, I could play that. Simple. I said to him, I said, "You're right. I'm sure you could do it. There's nothing to it." He gets my number. I get a text from him. Wow. After that, he goes, "Hey, you know, I might not have been right about that. I tried playing it. It's really not that easy." Anyway, I hope that some people enjoy. If there's any questions, if they send them to you, I'm happy to answer them. I have no,
Great.
you know, I'm honored and happy to do this.
Thank you so much for tuning in for Track Talk with Rick Marotta, Peg Dissected, and I'll see you again real soon. Thanks. And don't forget to subscribe. See ya.